on! Did you see what she just did? She slapped him because he's black, like that is unacceptable.
The sound cuts through everything else. A sharp crack. A child's scream. Gasps rippling through a confined space. Then crying, raw and terrified, the kind that makes your chest tighten even if you don't know the child. This 47-second video has been viewed over 80 million times in 3 days. You've probably seen it. The shaky footage, the chaos, the moment that made millions of people stop scrolling and stare in disbelief. But what you're about to hear is the full story that nobody knows. The story of how an 11-year-old girl with a tablet became the voice for a 6-year-old boy who couldn't speak for himself. The story of what really happened on Flight 447. Her name is Jacinta Morrison. 11 years old, sitting in seat 23B on a Tuesday afternoon, tablet resting on the tray table in front of her. Jacinta wasn't supposed to be part of this story. She was flying from Atlanta to Chicago with her Aunt Rosaline, heading to a regional robotics competition where she'd spent months programming a small robot to navigate obstacle courses. The tablet wasn't just entertainment for Jacinta. It was her tool, her window, her way of making sense of the world. She documented everything. Cloud formations through airplane windows. The way light shifted across her aunt's face when she smiled. The organized chaos of airport terminals. For Jacinta, the world was worth remembering, worth capturing, worth studying. She was quiet by nature, the kind of kid who listened more than she spoke, who noticed things other people missed. The way the flight attendant's smile didn't reach her eyes during the safety demonstration. The businessman in 21A who'd been rude to the gate agent. The mother 2 rows ahead trying to manage an excited little boy while balancing a baby carrier and a backpack. Jacinta noticed all of it. That mother was Josephine. And the little boy was Aaron, 6 years old, with eyes full of wonder and a smile that hadn't yet learned to dim itself for the comfort of strangers. This was Aaron's 3rd time on an airplane, and the magic hadn't worn off yet. He pressed his face against the window during takeoff, watching Atlanta shrink beneath them, asking his mother questions in that rapid-fire way that 6-year-olds do. Mama, why do the clouds look like cotton? Mama, can we touch the clouds? Mama, how does the plane stay up here? Josephine answered each question with patience, her voice soft, trying to keep him entertained while also keeping him calm. She knew the rules. Keep your child quiet. Don't disturb other passengers. Be considerate. She'd already gotten those looks from a few people during boarding, the ones that said, "Please don't let that child sit near me." She was doing her best. But Stephanie Crawford had already decided that Josephine's best wasn't good enough. Stephanie had been a flight attendant for 15 years. 15 years of recycled air and passenger complaints and tight schedules. 15 years of smiling on command and saying "you're welcome" to people who never said thank you. She wore her uniform with precision, every blonde hair pulled back into a regulation bun, her makeup carefully applied to meet company standards. But there was something cold in her eyes, something hard around her mouth even when she smiled. The job had worn grooves into her, and somewhere along the way patience had been the first thing to erode. She noticed Aaron immediately. Noticed the way he bounced in his seat during taxi. Noticed the questions, the energy, the uncontained joy of a child who hadn't yet learned to make himself small for the convenience of others. And something in her face tightened. The plane reached cruising altitude. The seatbelt sign dinged off. Aaron unbuckled immediately, wanting to show his mother a toy plane he'd brought in his backpack. Josephine gently guided him back into his seat, buckled him in again, handed him the toy. He made quiet airplane noises, flying it through the air in front of him, lost in imagination. Stephanie walked down the aisle, checking overhead bins, her eyes scanning the cabin with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd done this thousands of times. She stopped at Aaron's row. Looked down at him. Looked at Josephine. Her voice came out clipped, professional on the surface, but with an edge underneath that Josephine recognized immediately. "Can you control your child? Some passengers are trying to rest." The words hung in the air. Josephine felt her face flush. Aaron hadn't been loud. He'd been a normal 6-year-old, exhibiting a normal amount of energy for a child on an airplane. But Josephine knew this game. She'd played it before. "Apologize. Smooth it over. Don't make waves." "I'm so sorry," she said, her voice quieter than it should have been. "Aaron, baby, let's use our inside voice, okay?" Aaron looked up at his mother, confused by her sudden tension but obedient. He nodded, went back to his toy, this time moving it silently through the air. Stephanie walked away without another word, but Jacinta, 2 rows back, had watched the entire exchange. She'd seen the way Stephanie's lip curled slightly. She'd heard the emphasis on "your child," like it was an accusation. Something in her stomach felt wrong. The beverage service began 20 minutes later. Stephanie pushed the cart down the aisle with mechanical efficiency, handing out drinks and packets of pretzels with the bare minimum of courtesy. Aaron was still playing with his toy airplane, flying it in loops and dives, making it do barrel rolls. He was being good, being quiet, being exactly what his mother had asked him to be. But he was still 6 years old. And 6-year-olds have accidents. The toy plane slipped from his small hands during a particularly ambitious maneuver. It tumbled into the aisle just as Stephanie was approaching with the beverage cart. She didn't see it. Her foot caught the edge of the plastic plane. She stumbled, not enough to fall, but enough to lose her grip on the cup of tomato juice she'd been handing to the passenger in 22C. The red liquid splashed across the front of her pristine uniform, dark and spreading and impossible to ignore. The cart stopped. Everything stopped. Stephanie looked down at her uniform, then at the toy plane, then at Aaron, who had unbuckled himself and scrambled into the aisle to retrieve it. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Aaron's voice was small, frightened by the sudden attention, by the look on the flight attendant's face. Josephine was out of her seat immediately, reaching for her son, saying, I'm so sorry, it was an accident, let me help you clean that up. But Stephanie's hand shot up, stopping her. This is exactly what I'm talking about. Stephanie's voice was loud now, loud enough that passengers 3 rows away turned to look. You people never watch your children. This is a working environment, not a playground. You people. The words echoed. Passengers shifted in their seats. The businessman in 21A pulled out his phone. A woman across the aisle stopped mid-sip of her coffee. In first class, separated by a curtain but not by soundproofing, a passenger named Sierra lowered her book and frowned toward the commotion. Josephine's voice shook, but she stood her ground. Excuse me? You people? What exactly do you mean by that? I mean, Stephanie said, not backing down, not even trying to hide it anymore, that some passengers don't know how to travel appropriately. Some passengers let their children run wild and then act offended when there are consequences. 2 rows back, Jacinta's hands moved on instinct. She'd been watching the tension build, had felt something dark gathering in the air. Her fingers swiped across her tablet screen, opening the camera app, angling it just right to capture the scene ahead of her. She pressed record. The red dot appeared in the corner of the screen. She didn't know why she was recording. Just that something told her this moment needed to be remembered. Needed to be documented. Needed to exist beyond just the memories of the people witnessing it. Aaron was crying now, overwhelmed by the anger directed at him, by the way the flight attendant loomed over him, by his mother's fear that he could feel even if he didn't understand it. He reached for Josephine, his small arms stretching toward safety, toward the one person who always protected him. Sit down right now. Stephanie's hand shot out, grabbing Aaron's arm hard enough that he cried out. Don't touch my son. Josephine lunged forward, trying to put herself between the flight attendant and her child. And then it happened. Stephanie Crawford, 15-year veteran flight attendant, pulled her hand back and slapped Aaron across the face. Not a tap. Not a gesture. A full slap that connected with his cheek with an audible crack, that snapped his head to the side, that left an immediate red mark blooming across his brown skin. The cabin went silent. Completely, utterly silent. The hum of the engine seemed to fade. Time stretched and compressed simultaneously. Aaron's scream cut through the quiet, high and terrified and hurt, so hurt. Jacinta's tablet captured everything. The slap. The sound of it. Aaron's scream. Josephine's face transforming from shock to horror to rage. The passengers frozen in their seats. The woman in 22C with her hand over her mouth. The businessman already dialing someone. Sierra pushing through the curtain from first class, her face a mask of disbelief. Stephanie seemed to realize what she'd done only after the sound had faded. Her hand was still raised, trembling slightly. Aaron was sobbing into his mother's chest, Josephine having scooped him up immediately, her own body shaking with fury and fear. Other passengers were standing now, voices rising in protest, in shock, in anger. He was being uncontrollable, Stephanie said, but her voice wavered. I have every right to maintain order on this aircraft. I have a right to protect the safety of all passengers. You hit a child. Sierra's voice came from the front of the cabin, loud and incredulous. You just assaulted a 6-year-old child. The businessman was already on the phone with someone, speaking urgently. Another passenger was pressing the call button repeatedly. The cockpit door opened. The co-pilot emerged, took in the scene, the crying child, the trembling flight attendant, the furious passengers. What happened here? Everyone started talking at once. Stephanie tried to explain, tried to justify, but her words were drowned out by the accounts of passengers who'd seen everything, who couldn't believe what they'd witnessed, who demanded she be removed immediately. Josephine said nothing. She just held Aaron, rocking him, whispering in his ear that he was safe, that he was okay, that Mama had him. But her eyes, when they met Stephanie's, were full of a pain that went deeper than this moment, a pain that knew this wasn't the first time and wouldn't be the last, a pain that came from living in a world where your child could be hurt for simply existing. The co-pilot made a decision. Miss Crawford, you need to return to the galley. Another attendant will handle this section. We'll discuss this after landing. Stephanie opened her mouth to argue, then seemed to think better of it. She walked away, her uniform still stained with tomato juice, her hands still trembling, her career probably over but not yet aware of just how over it would be. Jacinta's finger hovered over the stop button. 2 minutes and 14 seconds. She pressed it. The recording saved automatically to her cloud storage, a backup of a backup, the evidence locked into digital permanence. She didn't tell anyone what she'd done. Not yet. She just sat in seat 23B, her heart pounding, her hands shaking, watching Josephine try to comfort Aaron while passengers around them offered tissues and kind words and impotent sympathy. The plane continued toward Chicago, the engines humming their constant note, carrying everyone forward while time seemed to have stopped in the cabin. Jacinta looked down at her tablet. At the video file icon. At proof of something terrible. And even at 11 years old, even without fully understanding the weight of what she held, she knew this moment would matter. Had to matter. Because if it didn't, then what had happened to Aaron was just another story that people would shake their heads at and forget. Before we continue with what happened next, if you believe children deserve to be protected, if you think what you just heard was wrong, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. This story is going to get bigger, more complicated, and more important, and you're not going to want to miss what happens next. Now let me ask you something. What would you have done if you'd been on that plane? Would you have recorded it like Jacinta? Would you have intervened? Would you have stayed silent? Drop your thoughts in the comments because this conversation matters. The plane landed at O'Hare International Airport 17 minutes late. But the delay was nothing compared to what was about to unfold. The wheels touched down at O'Hare International Airport at 4:17 p.m., and Jacinta could see them through the window before the plane even reached the gate. Police officers. 2 of them standing just inside the jetway, their uniforms dark and official against the sterile white walls of the airport. This wasn't standard procedure. This was a response. The captain's voice came over the intercom, steady and professional, asking all passengers to remain seated until further notice. The usual groans of impatience were absent. Everyone knew why they were waiting. Everyone had witnessed what happened. The cabin was thick with tension, with unspoken conversations happening through glances and shifting in seats. Aaron had finally stopped crying, exhausted into silence against his mother's chest. Josephine sat perfectly still, staring straight ahead, her jaw clenched so tight it looked painful. Stephanie Crawford sat in the rear galley, separated from the passengers, her stained uniform a visible reminder of how this had all started. She'd stopped trying to explain herself. Stopped trying to justify. She just sat there, waiting for whatever came next, her hands folded in her lap like she was praying, though Jacinta doubted prayer was what occupied her thoughts. The jetway connected. The door opened. The officers boarded with the kind of calm authority that comes from years of dealing with situations exactly like this. Behind them came a woman in a crisp suit, clipboard in hand, her expression professionally neutral. Airport security. The co-pilot met them at the entrance, speaking in low tones, gesturing toward the back of the plane, then toward Josephine's row. "Ma'am, we're going to need you to come with us," one of the officers said to Josephine, his voice gentle despite the uniform and the situation. "We need to get your statement about what happened on this flight." Josephine nodded, gathering her things with one arm while keeping Aaron pressed against her with the other. He was still hiccuping from crying, his face swollen and tear-stained, the red mark on his cheek now darkening into what would become a bruise. Other passengers watched them go, some with sympathy, some with that careful distance people maintain when they witness trauma but don't want to become part of it. "We'll need to speak with Miss Crawford as well," the second officer said, moving toward the rear galley. The woman with the clipboard began moving through the cabin, quietly asking if anyone had witnessed the incident and would be willing to provide a statement. Hands went up. The businessman from 21A. The woman in 22C. Sierra from first class pushed through the curtain again, her hand already raised. At least a dozen people volunteering to tell what they'd seen. Jacinta sat in 23B, her tablet on her lap, her heart hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat. Aunt Rosaline beside her touched her shoulder gently. "Baby, did you see what happened?" Rosaline asked quietly. Jacinta nodded but said nothing. The woman with the clipboard hadn't reached their row yet. She was taking names and seat numbers, organizing witness statements with the efficiency of someone who'd done this too many times before. They were eventually allowed to deplane, the passengers filing out in unusual silence, the normal chatter and phone calls subdued by what they'd witnessed. Jacinta walked with Rosaline down the jetway, past the police officers who were now speaking with Stephanie in low, firm tones, past the airport security station where Josephine sat with Aaron in her lap, giving her statement to an officer who wrote everything down in a small notebook. As they passed, Jacinta could hear fragments of the conversation. He dropped his toy and she tripped slightly, spilled some juice on her uniform. Then she got angry, said something about "you people," and grabbed Aaron's arm. When I tried to intervene, she slapped him. Across the face. Art. Everyone saw it. The officer nodded, writing. "And how old is your son, ma'am?" 6. He just turned 6 last month. 6 years old. Jacinta felt something hot and sharp in her chest. Aaron was only 6. Just a little kid who liked airplanes and asking questions. They continued toward baggage claim, but Jacinta kept looking back, watching the scene unfold behind them like something from a movie, except it was real, it was happening, and nobody seemed to know what to do about it. At baggage claim, more officials had gathered. Jacinta recognized the airline uniforms, the logo stitched over their hearts, the same logo that had been on Stephanie's uniform when she'd raised her hand and struck a child. One man stood apart from the others, older, his suit more expensive, his posture radiating authority. He was on his phone, speaking rapidly, his free hand gesturing sharply as he paced near the carousel. Moses Patterson, Senior Operations Manager for the airline's Chicago hub. He'd been pulled from a late lunch when the call came in, when the co-pilot had radioed ahead that there was an incident requiring immediate management attention. Incident. That's what they called it in the reports. An incident. Like it was a scheduling conflict or a maintenance issue and not a woman assaulting a child at 30,000 feet. Moses ended his call and moved quickly toward where Josephine was still giving her statement. Aaron clutched against her. The police officers looked up as he approached. "I'm Moses Patterson, Senior Operations Manager. I've been briefed on the situation. First, let me say on behalf of the airline, we are deeply sorry for what occurred on your flight today." Josephine looked at him, her eyes red but her gaze sharp. "Are you?" "Absolutely. We take the safety and comfort of all our passengers extremely seriously." His voice was smooth, practiced, the kind of voice trained to de-escalate and deflect. "I'd like to discuss how we can make this right for you and your son." "Make it right?" Josephine's voice rose slightly. "How exactly do you make it right when your employee assaulted my child?" Moses glanced at the police officers, a flicker of something crossing his face. "Concern. Calculation. Damage control. I understand you're upset, and you have every right to be. What I can offer you immediately is a full refund for your tickets, travel vouchers for future flights, and we'll cover any medical expenses for your son. We're so sorry for this misunderstanding." That word hung in the air like a slap of its own. Misunderstanding. Josephine stood up slowly, still holding Aaron, her whole body trembling with barely contained fury. Misunderstanding? A misunderstanding is when someone gets the wrong order at a restaurant. A misunderstanding is missing a turn on the highway. What happened on that plane was not a misunderstanding. She assaulted my 6-year-old son. She grabbed him. She hit him. In front of dozens of witnesses. And you're calling it a misunderstanding? Moses held up his hands in a placating gesture. "Ma'am, please, let's not use that word. Ms. Crawford is a 15-year veteran of our airline. She's been under considerable stress recently. Personal issues. We're going to handle this internally, I assure you. She'll face appropriate disciplinary action." "Let's not use that word," Josephine repeated, her voice hollow with disbelief. "Which word? Assault? Because that's what happened. That's the legal definition of what your employee did to my child." One of the police officers shifted uncomfortably. The other one stopped writing in his notebook and looked at Moses with an expression that wasn't quite professional neutrality anymore. Moses's voice became firmer, more businesslike. "I understand your emotional response, but we need to consider all factors here. Ms. Crawford claims she barely touched your son in an attempt to get him to return to his seat for safety reasons. She says she felt threatened when you became aggressive toward her." "Threatened?" Josephine's laugh was sharp and bitter. "I became aggressive when she put her hands on my child. And she didn't barely touch him. She slapped him hard enough to leave a mark. That's your perspective, ma'am? Ms. Crawford has a different recollection of events. The first police officer closed his notebook and looked at Moses with something that might have been annoyance. Sir, we have multiple witness statements that corroborate Ms. Josephine's account. At least 12 passengers have volunteered to provide statements describing what they saw. Witness statements are valuable, of course, Moses said carefully. But human memory is fallible, especially in emotional situations. Different people see different things. Without video evidence, this becomes a matter of he said, she said. Or rather, she said, she said. Without video evidence. Jacinta, standing with Rosaline near the baggage carousel, felt those words hit her like a physical thing. She looked down at her tablet at the locked screen that hid the video file underneath, the 2 minutes and 14 seconds that proved exactly what had happened, that turned he said, she said into here's exactly what she did. Josephine's voice was shaking now, with rage, with exhaustion, with the weight of fighting a system designed to protect itself rather than the people it was supposed to serve. So that's it? She gets away with hitting my son because you don't want to deal with the liability? Because it's easier to call it a misunderstanding and offer me travel vouchers. We're not saying she gets away with anything, Moses said, his PR voice firmly in place. We're saying we'll conduct a thorough internal investigation and take appropriate action based on our findings. In the meantime, your refund and compensation package will be processed immediately. The second police officer spoke up. Ma'am, we can file a report based on your statement and the witness accounts. However, the district attorney will determine whether to pursue charges based on the available evidence. Without video or physical evidence beyond the mark on your son's face, which could potentially be explained various ways, it may be difficult to prove beyond reasonable doubt. There it was again. Without video evidence. Josephine looked between the officers, Moses, the airline employees hovering nearby, all these adults in positions of authority telling her in various ways that what happened to her son wasn't quite enough to matter, wasn't quite enough to act on, wasn't quite enough to overcome the word of a 15-year veteran flight attendant against a mother and her crying child. He's 6 years old, she said quietly. He's 6 years old and he was slapped by an adult who was supposed to ensure his safety. And you're telling me that might not be enough. Nobody answered. The silence was its own response. Rosaline touched Jacinta's shoulder. Come on, baby. Let's get our bags and get out of here. You must be exhausted. But Jacinta couldn't move. She was watching Josephine, watching the way her shoulders sagged with defeat, watching Aaron's small face buried in his mother's neck, watching justice slip away in real time under the weight of corporate liability and plausible deniability and the phrase, without video evidence. They collected their bags. Rosaline kept looking at Jacinta with concern, noting the unusual silence, the way her niece's hands gripped the tablet like it was a lifeline. They walked toward the exit, past the police officers who were wrapping up their interviews, past Moses Patterson who was already on his phone again, probably with the legal department, already spinning the narrative into something manageable. Past Josephine, who sat on a bench near the exit with Aaron in her lap, crying quietly now that the officials had moved on, now that the statements were given and the damage control deployed and the travel vouchers offered like band-aids over bullet wounds. The Chicago air hit them as they stepped outside, cold and sharp after the recycled warmth of the airport. Rosaline hailed a cab to take them to their hotel. The robotics competition that had been the reason for this trip seemed distant now, unimportant compared to what they'd witnessed. In the cab, Rosaline finally asked the question that had been building since they deplaned. Baby, you okay? That was scary what happened on the plane. I'm sorry you had to see that. Jacinta was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at Chicago passing by, a city she'd been excited to visit that now felt heavy with something she couldn't quite name. Then she turned to her aunt, her voice barely above a whisper. Auntie Rose? I recorded it. The whole thing. The cab driver didn't react, music playing softly from the radio, traffic flowing around them. But Rosaline went completely still. You what? Jacinta's hands were shaking as she unlocked her tablet. When the flight attendant started yelling when I saw her grab Aaron, something told me to record it. So I did. I have the whole thing. Rosaline's expression cycled through several emotions in rapid succession. Shock, because her 11-year-old niece had had the presence of mind to document something adults had frozen during. Concern, because she was her 11-year-old niece and now held evidence of something terrible. Then something else, something harder, more determined. Show me. Jacinta pulled up the video file. 2 minutes and 14 seconds. She pressed play, the volume low so only they could hear. Rosaline watched, her hands slowly rising to cover her mouth. Watched Stephanie trip and spill the juice. Watched the disproportionate anger. Watched the "you people" comment. Watched the escalation. Watched Aaron crying, reaching for his mother. Watched Stephanie grab him. Watched the slap. The sound of it was worse on video somehow. Clear and sharp and unmistakable. Aaron's scream. Josephine's horror. The shocked silence of the cabin. Stephanie's justification that sounded even more hollow on playback. All of it, documented, preserved, undeniable. Rosaline watched the video 3 times, her expression changing with each viewing. The shock giving way to anger, giving way to determination. "Jacinta," she said carefully, her voice tight with emotion. "Do you understand what you have here? This isn't just a video. This is evidence. This is proof. This is the difference between that woman at the airport crying on a bench while they tell her it's her word against Stephanie Crawford's and actual justice." Jacinta nodded slowly. "That lady lied. At the airport when she was talking to the police. She said she barely touched him. But I saw it. Everyone saw it. The video shows exactly what she did. Why did she lie?" Rosaline was quiet for a moment, choosing her words carefully because this was a conversation that mattered. Because her niece was 11 years old and asking a question that deserved a real answer. "Baby, sometimes people lie because they're afraid of the truth. The truth means consequences. The truth means accountability. The truth means looking at yourself and what you've done and accepting responsibility for it. That's hard. So people lie. They minimize. They justify. They rewrite what happened in their heads until they believe their own version. But the truth doesn't change just because people lie about it." Jacinta stared at the frozen frame on her screen, Stephanie's hand mid-swing, Aaron's face about to change forever. "What do you want to do with this?" Rosaline asked. It was the right question. Not "what should you do?" or "what are you going to do?" but "what do you want to do?" giving Jacinta the agency to make her own choice, to decide for herself what justice looked like. Jacinta thought about Josephine on that bench, defeated. Thought about Aaron's bruised cheek and traumatized eyes. Thought about Moses Patterson and his travel vouchers and his, let's not use that word, and his internal investigation that would probably amount to nothing. Thought about Stephanie Crawford going home tonight, maybe on administrative leave, maybe suspended, but not arrested, not held accountable, free to tell her version where she barely touched him, where she was the victim of an aggressive mother and an uncontrollable child. "I want people to see what really happened," Jacinta said finally. "Aaron deserves that. His mama deserves that. The truth deserves that." Rosaline nodded once, firm and decisive. "Okay. Then that's what we'll do. But we need to be smart about this. We need to protect Aaron's privacy while still showing what happened. And we need to prepare for what comes after because baby, once this is out there, it's out there forever. People will have opinions. Strong ones. Are you ready for that?" Jacinta met her aunt's eyes. Is anyone ever ready for the right thing to be hard? That night, in their hotel room, Rosaline helped Jacinta set up a social media account. They chose a username that was simple and clear. They worked together to blur Aaron's face in the video, preserving his privacy while keeping everything else intact. His mother's face, clear and anguished. Stephanie's face, clear and guilty. The slap, undeniable. The audio, unmistakable. Jacinta wrote the caption herself, typing carefully on the tablet, deleting and rewriting until she had it exactly right. "This is what happened on Flight 447 today. The airline said it was a misunderstanding. You decide." She added the flight number, the date, no names because Rosaline had advised against it, just the facts in the video and the invitation for people to judge for themselves. Her finger hovered over the post button. This felt big. This felt important. This felt like jumping off something high without knowing if there was water below or rocks. "You sure?" Rosaline asked. "No," Jacinta admitted. "But I'm doing it anyway." She pressed post. The video uploaded to the cloud, processing, going live. The timestamp read 8:47 p.m. For the first few minutes, nothing happened. 0 views. 0 reactions. Just the video existing in the infinite digital void, one more piece of content in an ocean of content. Then the counter ticked. 1 view. Probably Rosaline refreshing to make sure it worked. 2 views. 3. Jacinta set the tablet down and went to brush her teeth, trying not to think about it, trying not to obsess over numbers that didn't matter except they did matter. They mattered so much because views meant eyes, meant people seeing, meant people knowing, meant maybe, possibly, hopefully, justice. When she came back 15 minutes later, the counter read 47 views. An hour later, lying in bed while Rosaline watched the news on low volume, Jacinta checked again. 200 views. A few comments. "This is horrible. Is this real?" That flight attendant needs to be fired. She set the tablet on the nightstand and tried to sleep, but her mind kept spinning, kept replaying the day, kept wondering if she'd done the right thing or opened something she couldn't control. At midnight, unable to sleep, she checked again. The counter read 50,000 views. Jacinta sat up in bed, her heart suddenly racing. 50,000. In 3 hours. The comments section had exploded. Hundreds of comments, thousands, people sharing their own stories of discrimination, of being mistreated by airline staff, of their children being targeted. People arguing in the comments about what they were seeing, about whether the video was edited, about whether Josephine should have controlled her son better, but mostly, overwhelmingly, people outraged by what they were witnessing. Someone had created a hashtag. Hashtag Justice for Aaron. It was already being used thousands of times. Rosaline woke up to Jacinta's gasp, sat up quickly, alert. What's wrong? Auntie Rose, look. They watched the numbers climb together. 51,000. 53,000. 55,000. The shares multiplying. The video spreading across platforms like wildfire, jumping from one social media site to another, from personal accounts to larger pages to news aggregators. By morning, when pale Chicago sunlight filtered through the hotel curtains and Jacinta woke from a few hours of restless sleep, the video had been viewed 2 million times. 2 million people had watched Aaron get slapped. 2 million people had heard Stephanie's justification. 2 million people had witnessed what Josephine had tried to report, what Moses Patterson had called a misunderstanding, what the police had said would be hard to prove without video evidence. Well, now there was video evidence. The hashtag Justice for Aaron was trending nationally. News outlets were picking it up, calling the airline for comment, sending reporters to dig into Stephanie Crawford's background. Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, every platform carried the video, carried the outrage, carried the demand that something be done. Someone had identified the airline from the uniform in the video. Their official social media accounts were being flooded with comments, with demands for statements, with threats of boycotts. The airline's PR team, who'd probably been sleeping peacefully while Moses Patterson handled everything with travel vouchers and internal investigations, woke up to a full-blown crisis. At 9:23 a.m., the airline released a statement on all their platforms. We are aware of a video circulating on social media depicting an incident on one of our flights. We are investigating the matter and taking it very seriously. We are committed to the safety and dignity of all our passengers. The statement was immediately met with derision. Investigating? Taking it seriously? Committed to safety and dignity? People replied with screenshots from the video with a timestamp, with demands for specifics. When would Stephanie be fired? Would charges be pressed? What constituted taking it seriously when a child had been assaulted? In his office at the civil rights law firm of Richardson and Associates, attorney Matthew Richardson was scrolling through his social media during his morning coffee when the video appeared in his feed. He watched it once. Then again. Then a third time, his jaw tightening with each viewing. Matthew had built his career on cases exactly like this. Discrimination, abuse of authority, corporations protecting their employees at the expense of victims. He'd seen it 1,000 times in 1,000 different contexts, but something about this video, about that little boy's scream, about his mother's helpless rage, about the casual cruelty of that slap, made his blood boil. He saved the video to his case files and made a note to reach out to whoever had posted it, to see if he could connect with the family, offer his services. This was exactly the kind of case that needed a legal advocate because corporations didn't voluntarily do the right thing. They did the profitable thing, the safe thing, the thing that protected their liability and their bottom line. It took legal pressure, public pressure, the threat of consequences to make them act with integrity. The comments section under the video was a battlefield. Most people were horrified, demanding justice, sharing the video, adding their voices to the call for accountability. But there were others, there are always others, who found ways to excuse the inexcusable. The kid was probably being a brat. The mother should have controlled him better. Flight attendants have a hard job, dealing with unruly passengers. This is being blown out of proportion. We don't know the full context. Except they did know the full context. It was right there in the video. 2 minutes and 14 seconds of full context. And in the middle of all of this noise, all of this attention, all of these millions of views and trending hashtags and news coverage, Jacinta's phone rang. Well, technically Rosaline's phone, since Jacinta didn't have her own phone, but the call was about the video, about Flight 447, about everything that was now spiraling beyond anything Jacinta had imagined when she pressed that post button. It was Josephine. Her voice was thick with tears, but this time they weren't tears of defeat. They were tears of relief, of gratitude, of not being alone anymore. "I don't know who posted that video," Josephine said. "I don't know how they got it or why they shared it. But the police called me this morning. They want to see it. They're reopening the investigation. The detective said with video evidence, they can pursue charges. The airline called 2 different person this time higher up, asking me not to talk to the media, offering more money. But I don't want their money. I want justice for my son." Rosaline looked at Jacinta, a question in her eyes. Jacinta nodded. "Miss Josephine," Rosaline said gently, "the person who posted that video is right here. My niece, Jacinta. She's 11 years old. She was sitting 2 rows behind you on the plane. And she wanted you and Aaron to have the truth on your side." There was silence on the other end of the line. Then a sound that might have been a sob or a laugh or both. "Can I talk to her?" Rosaline handed the phone to Jacinta, who took it with trembling hands. "Hello?" "Jacinta," Josephine's voice was warm despite the tears. "Baby, I don't even know what to say. Thank you doesn't feel like enough. You gave my son a voice when the world wanted him to be silent. You gave me proof when everyone said it was just my word against hers. You gave us a chance at justice. How can I ever thank you for that?" Jacinta felt her own eyes burning with tears. "You don't have to thank me. I just wanted people to see the truth. Aaron didn't deserve what happened. Neither did you. The world needs more people like you," Josephine said. "More people who see wrong and refuse to look away. More people who document truth instead of just witnessing it. You're 11 years old and you did something most adults don't have the courage to do." They talked for a few more minutes, Josephine explaining that a lawyer had reached out, that the police wanted to meet with her again, that suddenly the doors that had been closed were opening. All because of 2 minutes and 14 seconds of truth. When they hung up, Jacinta looked at her tablet, at the video that now had 2.3 million views and climbing, at the comment section that was still exploding with reactions, at the hashtag that was carrying Aaron's story far beyond what any of them could have predicted. She'd done the right thing. She knew that now. The hard thing, the scary thing, the uncertain thing. But absolutely the right thing. If you've made it this far in this story, if you're feeling what I'm feeling about what happened to Aaron and what Jacinta did about it, hit that subscribe button right now. Because this story is just getting started, and what happens next is going to show you exactly what happens when people refuse to accept injustice as inevitable. And let me ask you this. In the age of smartphones and social media, when anyone can document anything, do we have a responsibility to record injustice when we see it? Or is it enough to just be a witness? Drop your thoughts in the comments because I genuinely want to know what you think. Because Jacinta Morrison, 11 years old, sitting in a hotel room in Chicago while her video spread across the world, was about to learn that recording the truth was just the beginning. Making people care about the truth, making them act on the truth, making them demand justice based on the truth, that was the hard part. And she was just getting started. 48 hours after Jacinta pressed post, the video had been viewed 10 million times. 10 million. Let that number sit with you for a moment. 10 million people watching Aaron get slapped. 10 million people hearing Stephanie Crawford's voice say, "You people," like it was an accusation. 10 million people witnessing something that Moses Patterson had called a misunderstanding, that the airline had tried to handle with travel vouchers and internal protocols. The internet doesn't forget. And more importantly, the internet doesn't let you hide. Within hours of the video going viral, online sleuths had identified Stephanie Crawford. Not just her name, which had been mentioned in some of the news coverage, but everything. Her full employment history. Her address. Her social media accounts, which she'd apparently forgotten to make private or thought she'd never need to. And what they found was damning. Facebook posts from 3 years ago complaining about certain passengers who don't know how to act civilized. A Twitter thread about how some cultures just don't understand personal responsibility. Instagram photos from a rally with imagery that made people's stomachs turn. Comment sections under news articles about police violence where Stephanie had written things that revealed exactly what she thought about people who looked like Aaron and Josephine. Screenshots circulated. Archive sites preserved everything before she could delete it. The pattern wasn't subtle. This wasn't a woman who'd had one bad day, one moment of lost control under stress. This was a woman whose prejudices had been simmering for years, finally boiling over at 30,000 feet when a 6-year-old boy had the audacity to be excited about flying. More came forward. Other passengers who'd flown with Stephanie Crawford over her 15 years of service. A black businessman who'd been ignored for beverage service while she attended to white passengers around him. A Latina mother who'd been told her children were too loud, while white children 3 rows away were allowed to play without comment. An Asian couple who'd been asked if they understood English before she'd even attempted to communicate with them. Complaints that had been filed with the airline over the years, complaints that had apparently gone nowhere, disappeared into the void of internal reviews and benefit of the doubt, and she's been under stress. 15 years of this. 15 years of small cruelties and microaggressions and outright discrimination that passengers had experienced, reported, and watched nothing happen. Until now. Until a video made it impossible to look away. The airline's response was swift in the way that corporations respond when their liability becomes public. On Thursday afternoon, 52 hours after the video posted, they released a statement. Stephanie Crawford had been placed on administrative leave pending the completion of their internal investigation. Administrative leave. Not fired. Not terminated. Not held accountable. Just removed temporarily with pay while they figured out how to minimize the damage to their brand. The press conference was scheduled for Friday morning. Moses Patterson stood behind a podium bearing the airline's logo, flanked by two other executives whose names didn't matter because they weren't the ones who tried to buy Josephine's silence with travel vouchers. Camera flashes popped like small explosions. Reporters crowded the room, notebooks out, phones recording, questions already forming. Moses's voice was measured, carefully scripted, probably reviewed by a team of lawyers before he'd been allowed to speak. We want to address the incident that occurred on Flight 447 and the video that has been circulating on social media. First and foremost, we do not tolerate discrimination or violence of any kind. The safety and dignity of every passenger is our highest priority. A reporter interrupted. Then why wasn't Stephanie Crawford fired immediately? Moses's jaw tightened slightly, but his smile stayed professional. We have protocols to follow. We must complete our internal investigation before taking further action. This ensures fairness for all parties involved and protects us from potential legal complications. Legal complications? Another reporter, voice sharp with incredulity. There's video evidence of her assaulting a child. What more investigation is needed? We need to gather all relevant facts, interview all witnesses, review company policies, and ensure that any action we take is appropriate and defensible. We're not in the business of rushing to judgment based on a single video clip, no matter how compelling it may appear. A single video clip. 2 minutes and 14 seconds of documented assault reduced to a video clip that appeared compelling. Will she be fired? A reporter from the back called out. We will take appropriate action based on the findings of our investigation. We have protocols to follow. What about the criminal investigation? Police have confirmed they're pursuing charges. We're cooperating fully with law enforcement. However, our internal process is separate from any legal proceedings. Have you reached out to the family to apologize? Pause. A careful recalibration of his expression into something that might pass for concern if you weren't paying attention. We have been in contact with the family and have offered our support during this difficult time. Support. That's what he called the travel vouchers and the requests not to talk to media and the attempts to make this go away quietly. The press conference lasted 20 minutes and said nothing. Corporate speak wrapped around emptiness, protocols protecting protocols, investigations investigating investigations. The message was clear even if they never stated it directly. They were waiting for the outrage to die down, for the news cycle to move on, for something else to go viral and take the pressure off. Jacinta watched the press conference on her tablet, sitting on the couch in her family's living room back home. She'd returned from Chicago the day before, the robotics competition a blur of competing while her phone exploded with notifications, of trying to focus on code while the world focused on her video. Her team had placed third, which would have been the highlight of her year under any other circumstances. Now it felt like something that had happened to someone else. Her father, Japheth, sat beside her, his arm around her shoulders. Her mother on her other side. Aunt Rosaline in the armchair, all of them watching Moses Patterson dance around accountability with the skill of someone who'd been trained to protect corporations from consequences. They're protecting her, Japheth said when the press conference ended. That's what they're doing. All this talk about protocols and investigations and appropriate action. They're buying time, hoping this blows over. Jacinta's voice was small but firm. That's not fair. If Aaron had hit her, what would happen to him? Would they need an investigation? Would they need to gather all relevant facts? Or would he just be arrested immediately? Her mother squeezed her hand. Baby, the world doesn't always work the way it should. Sometimes the powerful get to play by different rules than the rest of us. It's wrong, but it's real. Jacinta looked at her mother, then at her father, then at the tablet in her lap where comments were already flooding in under news clips of the press conference. People angry at the non-answers. People demanding action. People saying they were done with that airline, done with companies that protected abusers, done with accepting protocols as an excuse for inaction. Then we have to make it work that way, Jacinta said quietly. Her parents exchanged a look, one of those wordless conversations that happen between people who've known each other long enough to communicate without speaking. Pride. Worry. Recognition that their daughter had somehow become someone who said things like, "We have to make it work that way," and meant it. That night, Jacinta couldn't sleep. She lay in her bed, tablet balanced on her knees, scrolling through the comments on her video, on the news articles, on the social media posts that had multiplied like cells dividing. The video count had passed 15 million. The hashtag Justice for Aaron had been used over 1 million times. But what did that mean? What did views and hashtags actually accomplish beyond making people feel like they'd done something by clicking share? The airline was still protecting Stephanie. Moses Patterson was still giving press conferences full of empty promises. Aaron was still traumatized, probably having nightmares, probably flinching when strangers got too close. And Jacinta was 11 years old in her bedroom scrolling through comments, feeling like she'd started something without knowing how to finish it. Then she saw a comment that made her stop scrolling. Someone needs to organize a protest at airline headquarters. Make them see we're serious. Make them understand this isn't going away. A protest. Jacinta had learned about protests in school. The March on Washington. The Selma to Montgomery marches. The students who'd walked out over school shootings. People gathering together, making their voices heard in person instead of just online. Making their presence impossible to ignore. She opened a new browser window and started researching. How do protests work? What makes them effective? She read about permits and peaceful demonstration and the importance of clear messaging. She read about Rosa Parks and the Montgomery bus boycott, how one woman's refusal to accept injustice had sparked a movement that changed laws. She read about youth activists, teenagers who'd organized walkouts and sit-ins, children who'd marched alongside adults because they understood that age didn't exempt you from having a voice. The more she read, the more an idea formed. The more she read, the more impossible it seemed. The more she read, the more necessary it felt. She pulled out her school notebook, the one she used for robotics notes and math homework, and started writing. Not a plan exactly, but the beginnings of one. Saturday. Noon. Airline headquarters. Signs. Speeches. Media. Make it impossible for them to ignore. Make views and hashtags become bodies and voices. Make digital outrage become physical presence. Morning came too quickly, sunlight filtering through her curtains while her notebook lay open on her desk. Pages filled with her neat handwriting, questions marked with stars, logistics that seemed overwhelming for an 11-year-old to figure out. Her parents were in the kitchen when she came downstairs, her mother making breakfast while her father read news on his phone. Aunt Rosaline had stayed overnight, was sitting at the table with coffee, looking tired but alert. They all looked up when Jacinta entered, her notebook clutched to her chest. "Baby, you're up early," her mother said. "You okay? I know this has all been a lot." Jacinta sat down at the table, opened her notebook, took a breath. "I want to organize a protest. At the airline's headquarters. This Saturday at noon. For Aaron. To make them fire Stephanie Crawford and actually hold her accountable instead of just investigating forever." Silence filled the kitchen. Her mother's spatula stopped mid-flip. Her father's phone lowered. Rosaline's coffee cup paused halfway to her lips. Japheth spoke first, his voice careful. "Baby, you're 11 years old. This is a lot. Organizing a protest isn't like making a video. There's permits and logistics and safety concerns and media and—" "I know," Jacinta interrupted. "I researched it. I know it's complicated. But Dad, 15 million people have watched that video. Thousands of people are commenting every hour saying someone should do something. I have 47,000 followers now because of that video. People are listening to me. Shouldn't I say something that matters?" Her mother came to the table, sat down slowly. "Jacinta, we're so proud of you. What you did on that plane, sharing that video, giving Aaron and his mother a voice, that's incredible. But this is different. This is putting yourself out there in a different way. This is making yourself the face of this. Are you ready for that?" "I don't know if anyone's ever ready for that," Jacinta said, echoing what she'd told Rosaline in the cab. "But I know that Aaron deserves more than an administrative leave. I know that Josephine deserves more than travel vouchers. I know that if I don't do this, then what was the point of recording it? What was the point of sharing it? Just so people could watch and feel angry and then move on to the next viral video?" Rosaline leaned forward. "Baby, if you do this, there will be pushback. There will be people who support you and people who attack you. There will be adults who question your parents for letting you do this. There will be media attention. Your life might not go back to normal for a long time. Are you sure? Jacinta thought about Aaron's face in the video, the moment before the slap when he'd just been a 6-year-old reaching for his mother. Thought about Josephine on that bench in the airport, defeated by systems designed to protect themselves instead of the people they were supposed to serve. Thought about Moses Patterson and his protocols and his administrative leave and his absolute certainty that this would blow over if they just waited long enough. I'm sure. Her parents looked at each other again, that wordless conversation. Then her father sighed, a sound that mixed resignation with respect. Okay. If you're doing this, we're doing it right. We're getting proper permits. We're coordinating with police. We're making sure it's safe and legal and organized. And we're doing it as a family. You don't carry this alone. Jacinta felt something tight in her chest loosen slightly. She wasn't alone. She'd never been alone. By lunchtime, she'd created the post. It took her 20 minutes to write, deleting and rewriting, trying to find words that were clear and strong and true. I'm Jacinta Morrison. I'm the girl who recorded the video of Stephanie Crawford assaulting Aaron on Flight 447. I'm organizing a protest at Airline headquarters this Saturday at noon. If you believe Stephanie Crawford should be fired and arrested, if you believe children deserve to be safe on airplanes, if you believe justice matters more than corporate protocols, join me. #Justice for Aaron. She added the address of the airline's headquarters. Added a note about peaceful protest. Added her hope that people would care enough to show up in person, not just online. Her finger hovered over the post button. This felt bigger than the video somehow. The video had been documentation, truth-telling. This was action. This was asking people to do something, not just watch something. She pressed post. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within minutes, thousands of likes. Hundreds of comments. I'll be there. Count me in. This kid is braver than most adults. Someone get this girl a megaphone and let her lead. The shares multiplied, the post jumping across platforms, the call to protest spreading faster than even the original video had. Within an hour, Matthew Richardson called. The civil rights attorney who'd reached out to Josephine, who'd been building a case, who understood how these things worked. Jacinta, this is Matthew Richardson. I represent Josephine and Aaron in their case against the airline and Stephanie Crawford. I saw your post about the protest. I'd like to help you organize this properly if you're open to that. Jacinta's parents were on speakerphone, listening, nodding. What does properly mean? Jacinta asked. It means making sure you have the permits so the police don't shut you down. It means coordinating with the city about road closures and safety barriers. It means having a clear message and designated speakers and a plan for how to handle counter-protesters if they show up. It means protecting you while amplifying your voice. Can I help you do that? Yes, Jacinta said without hesitation. Yes, please. Matthew Richardson was true to his word. Over the next 4 days, he gave Jacinta a crash course in peaceful protest organization. They filed for permits, which were approved because Jacinta's father knew someone who knew someone in the city planning office and because the cause was sympathetic and because denying an 11-year-old girl the right to protest would be its own PR nightmare. They coordinated with local police, who agreed to provide security and road barriers while maintaining a respectful distance. They created a rough schedule, gathering at noon, speeches starting at 12:30, lasting no more than 2 hours to maintain energy and message clarity. They designated first aid stations and bathroom access and what to do if things got tense. Josephine agreed to speak. Her voice shaking over the phone but determined. If Jacinta is brave enough to organize this, I'm brave enough to stand up there and tell what happened to my son. Local youth organizations reached out offering support. A high school activism club said they'd bring 50 students. A community center said they'd provide sound equipment. A local church offered to make water and snacks available. People wanted to help. People wanted to be part of something that mattered. Jacinta made signs with Rosaline, spreading poster board across the living room floor, using markers in bright colors that would show up in photos and videos. Children deserve safety in bold red letters. Fire racist flight attendants in black and blue. We saw what you did, with a drawing of a tablet screen. Protocols aren't justice in response to Moses Patterson's press conference. They made dozens, knowing others would bring their own but wanting to have enough for people who showed up unprepared but ready to stand. On Thursday, 2 days before the protest, Stephanie Crawford's attorney released a statement. It appeared on news websites, was shared on social media, was designed to shift the narrative before Saturday came. My client, Stephanie Crawford, is the victim of a rush to judgment in the court of public opinion. She acted within her authority as a flight attendant to maintain order and ensure passenger safety. The video that has been circulated is being taken out of context and does not show the full interaction or the threats she was responding to. Ms. Crawford has served the airline faithfully for 15 years and deserves due process, not a witch hunt led by an overzealous child seeking attention. An overzealous child seeking attention. Those words spread as quickly as the statement itself. Jacinta read them on her tablet, felt something hot and sharp in her chest, but before she could even process it, the internet processed it for her. The comments under the attorney's statement were brutal. A 6-year-old was threatening her? Context. We saw the context. It's called assault. Calling an 11-year-old overzealous for documenting violence. Real classy. This statement just guaranteed I'm going to that protest. If the attorney had been trying to calm things down, trying to make this go away, trying to paint Stephanie as the victim, he'd catastrophically miscalculated. The statement added fuel to a fire that was already burning hot. The protest that might have drawn a few hundred people was now guaranteed to draw thousands. The airline's PR team went into crisis mode. Anonymous sources told reporters that there were emergency meetings happening at the highest levels. That Moses Patterson had been removed from public-facing duties. That the board of directors was demanding a resolution before the protest made them look even worse. That Stephanie Crawford's employment was being seriously reconsidered, though no official decision had been announced. Too little too late. That's what the comments said. That's what Jacinta thought every time she saw another article about the airline scrambling to save face. By Friday, the day before the protest, the media coverage had intensified beyond anything Jacinta could have predicted. News channels were running segments about her. About an 11-year-old girl organizing a protest. About whether children should be involved in activism. About whether her parents were wrong to allow this. Some commentators praised her courage, called her a voice for her generation, compared her to other young activists who'd sparked movements. Others questioned everything. Her parents' judgment. Her motivations. Whether she truly understood what she was doing or was being manipulated by adults with political agendas. A national morning show reached out asking if Jacinta would do an interview via video call. Her parents discussed it, weighing the risks against the opportunity to let Jacinta speak for herself instead of letting others speak for her. They decided yes, but with conditions. Jacinta could end the interview at any time. Questions had to be submitted in advance. No ambushing an 11-year-old on live television. The interview was scheduled for Friday afternoon. Jacinta sat at the desk in her room, tablet propped up with books, the camera angle showing her face and the posters behind her on the wall. Her mother and father stood just off camera, protective presences. Rosaline monitored the live comments, ready to end the call if things got hostile. The reporter appeared on screen, professional smile, carefully styled hair, voice modulated for sympathetic journalism. Jacinta, thank you for joining us. I know this has been an overwhelming week for you. First, I want to ask, how are you doing? A softball question. An opening to establish her as human, not just viral video girl. I'm okay. A little nervous about tomorrow. But mostly I'm focused on making sure the protest goes well and that people hear what we're trying to say. And what is it you're trying to say? That Stephanie Crawford assaulted a 6-year-old child and needs to be held accountable. That the airline needs to fire her and stop hiding behind investigations and protocols. That children deserve to be safe when they fly. That justice shouldn't depend on whether something goes viral. Clear. Direct. Rehearsed but genuine. Some people are saying you're too young to be organizing something like this, that you don't fully understand the complexities involved. What do you say to that? There it was. The question designed to undermine her, wrapped in the neutral language of some people say. Jacinta looked directly into the camera. Remembered what her father had told her. Speak your truth, don't defend it, just speak it. I understand what I saw on that plane. I understand the difference between right and wrong. I understand that when a grown woman slaps a child hard enough to leave a bruise, that's wrong. Being 11 doesn't mean I can't recognize injustice. It doesn't mean I can't speak up. It doesn't mean I can't organize people who agree with me. If anything, maybe being young means I haven't learned yet that some things are too hard to fight for. Maybe that's a good thing. The reporter paused, probably hadn't expected such a composed answer from an 11-year-old. Your parents have faced criticism for allowing you to do this, for putting you in the public eye this way. What do you say to people who think they're being irresponsible? Jacinta felt her mother tense off camera. This was an attack disguised as a question, implying her parents were bad parents, implying she was being exploited. My parents didn't make me do any of this. I made the choice to record the video. I made the choice to post it. I made the choice to organize the protest. They've been supportive while also making sure I understand what I'm getting into. That's not irresponsible. That's respecting that I have my own voice and my own agency. Some people seem to think kids should be seen and not heard unless it's convenient for adults. I think that's the real irresponsibility. The reporter's professional smile faltered slightly. This kid wasn't playing along with the narrative, wasn't giving sound bites that could be edited into concern-trolling segments. Last question, Jacinta. What do you hope happens tomorrow at the protest? I hope people show up. I hope we're loud enough that the airline can't ignore us anymore. I hope Stephanie Crawford gets fired and arrested. I hope Aaron sees that people fought for him. And I hope that next time something like this happens, people don't wait for it to go viral. I hope they speak up immediately because it's the right thing to do, not because millions of people are watching. The interview ended. Within an hour, clips were circulating online. 11-year-old activist shuts down reporter. This kid gets it. Maybe being young means I haven't learned yet that some things are too hard to fight for. That particular line became its own meme, shared thousands of times, a rallying cry for the protest tomorrow. But that night, lying in bed while her parents thought she was asleep, Jacinta scrolled through her messages. Alongside the supportive ones, the encouraging ones, the ones saying they'd see her tomorrow, there were others. Hateful ones. Vicious ones. Messages calling her names that made her eyes sting with tears. Messages saying she was a race baiter, an attention seeker, that she should mind her own business. Messages that threatened her, that said awful things about her family, that made her understand for the first time what it meant to have enemies you'd never met. She didn't tell her parents about those messages. They were already worried enough. She just marked them as spam and kept scrolling until she found enough good to balance the bad, until she could breathe normally again, until she could remember why she was doing this. Rosaline found her still awake at midnight, tablet glowing in the dark. Can't sleep? Jacinta shook her head. Rosaline sat on the edge of the bed, familiar presence, safe presence. I'm scared, Jacinta admitted quietly. What if nobody shows up tomorrow? What if only like 10 people come and the airline just laughs at us? What if I organize this whole thing and it doesn't matter? Then it doesn't matter, Rosaline said simply. But baby, you already mattered the moment you pressed record on that plane. You already mattered when you posted that video. Everything after that is extra. You gave Aaron and his mama a fighting chance. That's not nothing. Tomorrow, whether 10 people show up or 10,000, you'll be standing up for what's right. That matters regardless of the outcome. But what if it's not enough? What if Stephanie still doesn't get fired? What if nothing changes? Rosaline was quiet for a moment, choosing her words carefully. Baby, you don't have to do this tomorrow. You've already done so much. Nobody would blame you if you said this was too much, if you wanted to step back and let the adults handle it from here. Jacinta thought about Aaron. About how scared he'd looked reaching for his mother. About the sound of that slap. About Josephine on the bench at the airport, defeated until the video gave her proof. About Moses Patterson's press conference and his protocols and his certainty that this would blow over. Aaron was scared, Jacinta said. His mama was scared. And that lady wasn't sorry, she just didn't want to get in trouble. If I don't show up tomorrow, I'm saying that's okay. I'm saying people can hurt kids and lie about it and hide behind protocols, and that's just how the world works. And it's not okay. It's not. Rosaline pulled her into a hug, holding her niece who was somehow still 11 years old despite everything she'd taken on, everything she'd become. Okay then, Rosaline whispered. Okay. Then tomorrow we show them it's not okay. Together. Saturday morning came with clear skies and unseasonable warmth. A good day for a protest if such a thing existed. Jacinta got dressed carefully, choosing clothes her mother had helped her pick out. Nothing too formal, nothing too casual. A purple shirt because it was Aaron's favorite color according to a detail in a news article. Comfortable shoes because she'd be standing for hours. Her tablet in her backpack, charged and ready because documentation was what she did, who she was. The ride to airline headquarters felt both endless and too short. Her father driving, her mother in the passenger seat occasionally glancing back with expressions Jacinta couldn't quite read. Pride and worry and love and fear all mixed together. Rosaline beside her, holding her hand, squeezing it reassuringly whenever Jacinta's legs started bouncing with nervous energy. They turned the corner toward the headquarters building. And Jacinta saw the crowd. People. Hundreds of them. Thousands of them. Filling the parking lot, spilling onto the sidewalks, holding signs and wearing purple shirts and standing together in the warm morning sun waiting for noon, waiting for her, waiting to make their voices heard. Jacinta's breath caught. Her father pulled into a designated parking spot that Matthew Richardson had arranged. Through the window she could see news vans, camera crews, reporters with microphones, police officers maintaining peaceful order, first aid tents, tables with water and supplies. This was real. This was happening. This was people showing up, not just online but in person, bodies and voices and physical presence that couldn't be ignored or dismissed or explained away with protocols. If you're still with me, if you're feeling what I'm feeling about what's about to happen, hit that subscribe button right now, because what happens at this protest is going to show you exactly what happens when courage meets community, when one girl's truth becomes a movement, when people decide enough is enough. Jacinta Morrison, 11 years old, opened the car door and stepped out into the sound of hundreds of voices chanting in unison. Justice for Aaron. Fire Crawford now. Justice for Aaron. Fire Crawford now. Her hands were shaking. Her heart was pounding. But she was here. They were all here. And in a few minutes she would walk up to that microphone and speak truth to power and find out if her voice, amplified by thousands of others, was loud enough to make justice happen. Let me ask you this. Would you show up? If an 11-year-old organized a protest for something she believed in, something you believed in, would you take the time out of your Saturday to stand with her? Or would you just share a post online and call it activism? Because the difference between the two is everything. The protest was about to begin. And nothing was going to be the same after. The airline headquarters building rose 12 stories into the Chicago sky, all glass and steel and corporate architecture designed to project power and permanence. On a normal Saturday morning, the parking lot would be nearly empty, maybe a few cars belonging to weekend security staff, the building quiet and imposing in its emptiness. This was not a normal Saturday morning. Jacinta's father pulled into the parking lot at 11 a.m., an hour before the protest was officially scheduled to begin, and there were already people there. About 50 of them, scattered across the parking lot in small groups, holding signs, wearing purple shirts, some sitting on the curb, some standing and talking, all of them waiting. Jacinta pressed her face against the car window, counting heads, feeling her stomach flip with nervous energy. 50 people. That was more than she'd secretly feared would show up. But was it enough? Would 50 people make the airline notice? Would 50 people be loud enough to matter? Matthew Richardson was already there, standing near a small stage that had been set up overnight, clipboard in hand, coordinating with the police officers who were establishing barriers and designating areas for protesters, media, and foot traffic. He saw Jacinta's family arrive and waved them over, his expression professionally calm but his eyes revealing satisfaction at the turnout so far. "Good morning, Jacinta. How are you feeling?" "Nervous," she admitted, gripping Rosaline's hand tighter. "That's normal. Healthy even. The nervousness means you care about getting this right." He gestured toward the growing crowd. "We're expecting a good turnout. The permit allows for up to 2,000 people. I don't think we'll hit that number, but based on the social media responses, we should have several hundred by noon." Several hundred. The number felt impossible and necessary at the same time. The next 30 minutes passed in a blur of preparation. Matthew walked Jacinta through the schedule again, making sure she understood when she'd speak, how long to aim for, where to stand. Her parents hovered nearby, protective without being smothering, letting her have this moment while making sure she knew they were there if she needed them. Rosaline helped set up the signs they'd made, arranging them so people arriving could pick them up and add their voices to the visual message. And people kept arriving. By 11:30, the crowd had swelled to about 200. Not just young activists or college students with free time on a Saturday, but families. Parents with children, some Aaron's age, some older, some younger. Elderly people who'd lived through other movements, other protests, who recognized the importance of showing up when injustice needed to be confronted. Community leaders from local organizations who'd mobilized their members. Teachers who'd seen too many students treated differently because of the color of their skin. People who'd experienced their own versions of what happened on Flight 447, people who were tired of being told to let it go, people who'd seen that video and decided this time would be different. The diversity of the crowd struck Jacinta as she watched from near the stage. Black families standing beside white families, standing beside Latino families, standing beside Asian families. Different ages, different backgrounds, different stories that somehow all connected to this one moment, this one child who'd been hurt, this one woman who needed to be held accountable. The signs were everywhere now. The ones Jacinta and Rosaline had made mixed with hundreds of others that people had created themselves. "Our children are not target practice. 15 years too long." We believe Aaron. Fire Stephanie Crawford. No more administrative leave for assault. Jacinta Morrison for President 2044. That last one made Jacinta smile despite her nerves, a small moment of lightness in the weight of what they were doing. News helicopters began circling overhead, the rhythmic thump of their rotors providing a soundtrack to the gathering. Camera crews moved through the crowd, capturing footage, interviewing protesters, building the narrative that would play on evening news broadcasts across the country. Local channels, national networks, international media, all of them recognizing that this was a story worth covering, an 11-year-old organizing a protest that had captured public attention in the same way her video had. By noon, the crowd had exploded past Matthew's estimate of several hundred. 800 people. Maybe more. It was hard to count accurately with people still arriving, parking blocks away and walking because the designated lot was full, streaming in from side streets and public transportation. 800 voices waiting to be heard. 800 bodies occupying space, refusing to be dismissed or ignored or explained away with corporate protocols. The energy was electric. Chants started spontaneously and spread through the crowd like waves. Justice for Aaron. Fire Crawford now. No peace, no justice. The sound was overwhelming in the best way. Loud enough to matter. Loud enough to be heard inside that glass and steel building where executives were probably watching from upper floor windows, probably panicking, probably holding emergency meetings about how to respond. Jacinta stood near the stage, holding Rosaline's hand so tightly her fingers ached. She was shaking. Not from cold, the day was warm, almost too warm for the purple shirt she wore, but from adrenaline and fear and something else she couldn't quite name. Pride maybe. Or purpose. The feeling that comes from starting something and watching it become bigger than you ever imagined. A car pulled up near the edge of the parking lot, and Jacinta recognized it immediately. Josephine's car. She watched as Josephine got out from the passenger side, moving slowly, carefully, like someone who hadn't slept well in days. A family friend got out from the driver's side. And in the back seat, just visible through the window, was Aaron. Josephine had told Matthew she'd bring Aaron but he'd stay in the car. That he wasn't ready to be in a crowd, wasn't ready for the noise and attention and overwhelming presence of hundreds of people gathering because of what happened to him. But he wanted to be there. Wanted to see that people cared. Wanted to know he mattered. Matthew approached Josephine, spoke with her quietly, walked her toward the stage area while the family friend stayed with the car, with Aaron, a protective presence ensuring he was safe while still being present. The police presence was heavy but respectful. Officers stationed around the perimeter, not riot gear and aggression but professional observation, making sure the protest stayed peaceful, making sure traffic flowed around the gathered crowd, making sure everyone's rights were protected, protesters and building occupants alike. This was what good policing looked like, what it was supposed to look like. Authority that protected rather than intimidated. At 12:15, movement on the other side of the parking lot caught Jacinta's attention. A group of about 20 people arriving together, carrying their own signs, their own message. Counter-protesters. Stephanie Crawford is innocent. Stop the witch hunt. Due process matters. Support our flight attendants. Tension rippled through the main crowd as people noticed the counter-protesters. The chanting faltered slightly. Police officers moved subtly, positioning themselves between the two groups, creating a buffer without being obvious about it. Matthew touched Jacinta's shoulder. It's okay. They have a right to be here too. As long as everyone stays peaceful, this is what democracy looks like. Different opinions occupying the same space without violence. The counter-protesters set up in their designated area, their 20 signs a stark visual minority compared to the hundreds on Jacinta's side. Some protesters shouted across the distance, angry words that didn't quite carry over the general noise. But Matthew had prepared for this, had coaches stationed throughout the crowd with instructions. Don't engage, don't escalate, stay focused on the message. The energy shifted, became more charged, more intense, but stayed peaceful. This was controlled outrage. This was directed purpose. This was people who came to make a point, not to start a fight. At 12:30, Matthew stepped up to the microphone. The sound system screeched slightly with feedback, then settled. He raised his hand and the crowd gradually quieted, 800 people falling into expectant silence, ready to hear why they'd come, ready to add their voices to something bigger than themselves. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Matthew Richardson. I'm a civil rights attorney representing Josephine and Aaron in their case against the Airline and Stephanie Crawford. First, I want to thank all of you for being here today, for taking time out of your Saturday to stand for justice. for refusing to let this moment pass quietly. The crowd applauded, a wave of sound that rolled across the parking lot. We're here today because of a video that has now been viewed over 80 million times. A video that documented something that should never happen. A grown woman in a position of authority, assaulting a 6-year-old child. But this isn't just about one video. This isn't just about one incident. This is about a pattern. Matthew's voice was practiced, professional, designed to be heard and remembered. He outlined the legal case he was building. The complaints against Stephanie Crawford that dated back years. The airline's failure to properly investigate or discipline. The corporate culture that protected employees over passengers. The way systems of power insulated people from consequences until something went viral and made it impossible to hide. The airline wants you to believe this is complicated. They want you to believe they need time to investigate, to gather all the facts, to follow protocols. But here's what we know. We have video evidence. We have witness statements from multiple passengers. We have a pattern of complaints. We have a 6-year-old child with trauma that will likely follow him for years. And we have an airline that has offered travel vouchers and empty apologies instead of accountability. The crowd's energy shifted, became focused, angry in that productive way that demands action. Stephanie Crawford should be fired. Immediately. Not placed on administrative leave. Not suspended pending investigation. Fired. And she should be arrested and charged with assault. Because that's what happened. That's what 80 million people watched happen. And if the law means anything, if justice means anything, there must be consequences. Applause erupted again, louder this time, sustained, the sound of agreement and determination. Matthew spoke for 15 minutes, laying out the case with the precision of someone who'd spent his career fighting these battles, winning some, losing others, but always showing up. When he finished, he introduced the next speaker. There's someone here today who has shown tremendous courage in the face of something no mother should ever have to experience. Josephine, would you please come up? Josephine approached the microphone slowly, as if walking through water, as if every step took more energy than she had. She wore a simple dress, her hair pulled back, her face showing the exhaustion of someone who hadn't slept properly in a week. But her eyes, when she looked out at the crowd, were clear and determined. She gripped the microphone stand with both hands, steadying herself, finding her voice. My name is Josephine. And my son Aaron is 6 years old. Her voice cracked on his name. She paused, collected herself, continued. A week ago, Aaron loved airplanes. He loved watching them take off. He loved looking out the window at the clouds. He loved the excitement of travel. We were flying to visit my mother in Chicago. It was supposed to be a happy trip. A fun trip. A normal trip. The crowd was absolutely silent now, 800 people holding their collective breath. Aaron is a good kid. He asks a lot of questions. He gets excited. He has energy the way 6-year-olds have energy. But he listens. He's kind. He's gentle. He wouldn't hurt anyone. And he didn't deserve what happened to him. Josephine's voice was shaking now, emotion threatening to overwhelm her, but she pushed through. Since that flight, Aaron has nightmares. He wakes up crying. He's scared of strangers now. He flinches when people approach him too quickly. He won't even look at pictures of airplanes anymore. Something he loved was turned into something that traumatized him. Because a grown woman decided his excitement, his joy, his childness was something that needed to be punished. She reached into her purse and pulled out a photograph. Held it up for the crowd to see. Even from a distance, the image was clear. Aaron's face, his cheek darkened with bruising, his eyes red from crying. The crowd's energy shifted again. The anger that had been productive and focused became something rawer, more visceral. This wasn't abstract injustice anymore. This was a real child with a real bruise and real trauma. They told me it was a misunderstanding, Josephine continued, her voice gaining strength from the crowd's reaction. They offered me travel vouchers. They asked me not to talk to the media. They wanted me to let it go. To move on. To accept that sometimes things happen and there's nothing you can do about it. She paused, her grip on the microphone stand tightening. But I couldn't let it go. Because if I let it go, the next mother wouldn't have a choice. The next child wouldn't have protection. The next time Stephanie Crawford decided someone's child was too loud or too excited or too black, she'd do it again. Because she'd gotten away with it before. The word hung in the air. Too black. Josephine had named it, had said what everyone was thinking, but some were afraid to speak aloud. The racial component that had been simmering under every comment, every discussion, every analysis of the video. So I want to thank the person who recorded that video. Who gave me proof when they said it was just my word against hers. Who gave Aaron a chance at justice when the system was ready to dismiss us? Josephine looked toward where Jacinta stood near the stage, her eyes finding the 11-year-old girl who'd changed everything. Jacinta, wherever you are, thank you. Thank you for seeing my son. Thank you for believing he mattered. Thank you for being braver than most adults. The crowd erupted in applause, heads turning to look for Jacinta, who stood small and overwhelmed near the stage steps, tears streaming down her face. There's someone else here today, Josephine said when the applause died down. Someone who tried to speak up 3 years ago and was ignored. Ariana, would you come up here with me? A woman in her 30s climbed the stage steps, standing beside Josephine, her own hands trembling as she approached the microphone. Ariana Stevens. Another mother. Another story that nobody had listened to until now. My name is Ariana. 3 years ago, I flew with Stephanie Crawford. I had my daughter with me. She was 8 at the time. We were going to a family reunion. My daughter spilled juice on the seat during turbulence. It was an accident. Stephanie Crawford's reaction was, it was cruel. She berated my daughter, called her careless, said things that made my 8-year-old cry. When I tried to defend her, Stephanie told me that people like us needed to teach our children better manners. Ariana's voice was steady but filled with regret, with the weight of what she hadn't done. I complained to the airline, filed a formal complaint, documented everything. They investigated. They told me Stephanie had a different recollection of events. They told me I was being too sensitive. They told me to let it go. That phrase again. Let it go. And I did. I let it go. I moved on. I told myself it wasn't worth fighting. That it was just one bad experience. That there was nothing I could do. Ariana looked out at the crowd, her eyes shining with unshed tears. I regret that every day. Because I let it go and look what happened. Another mother. Another child. Except this time it wasn't just verbal cruelty. This time it was physical assault. And I keep thinking if I had fought harder 3 years ago, if I hadn't let it go, maybe Aaron would never have been hurt. Maybe Stephanie Crawford would have been fired before she could escalate. Maybe my silence contributed to this. The crowd was silent again, but it was a different kind of silence. Understanding. Recognition. How many people in that crowd had let something go? Had experienced discrimination or cruelty and decided it wasn't worth fighting? Had told themselves it was just one incident, one bad day, one person having a hard time? I'm here today because I won't let it go anymore, Ariana said firmly. I'm here because Aaron deserves better. Because Josephine deserves better. Because every child who flies deserves better. And because silence protects the wrong people. She stepped back from the microphone and Josephine embraced her, 2 mothers connected by the same woman's cruelty, separated by 3 years and a viral video that made the difference between being dismissed and being believed. Matthew returned to the microphone. Thank you, Ariana. Thank you, Josephine. Your courage matters. Your voices matter. He turned, gestured toward the side of the stage where Jacinta stood, still holding Rosaline's hand, still crying, still terrified and determined in equal measure. And now, I'd like to introduce the young woman who made all of this possible. Who documented truth when others might have looked away. Who shared that truth when she could have kept it private. Who organized this protest when she could have let adults handle everything. Jacinta Morrison, everyone. The crowd exploded. Applause so loud it drowned out the helicopters overhead. Chanting her name. Jacinta. 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 800 people acknowledging an 11-year-old girl who'd refused to accept that injustice was inevitable. Jacinta walked toward the microphone on legs that felt disconnected from her body. Each step an act of will. Rosaline walked with her until they reached the stage steps, then squeezed her hand one final time and let go, letting Jacinta take this walk alone. The stage felt impossibly high. The microphone felt impossibly far away. The crowd felt impossibly large. But Jacinta climbed those steps anyway, crossed that stage anyway, stood before that microphone anyway. She was small. The microphone had to be adjusted downward to reach her height. She gripped the stand the way Josephine had, needing something solid to hold onto while 800 people and news cameras and helicopters and counter-protesters and police officers and the weight of everything watched and waited for her to speak. For a moment nothing came out. Her throat was tight. Her hands were shaking. The prepared speech she'd practiced in her bedroom felt distant and impossible to remember. Then she saw Aaron. In the car at the edge of the parking lot, his face pressed against the window watching. Being brave enough to be present even though he was scared. Being strong enough to witness people fighting for him. Jacinta found her voice. My name is Jacinta Morrison. I'm in 6th grade. I'm 11 years old. 3 days ago, I was on a plane to a robotics competition. I brought my tablet because I like to record things. I like to document the world. I never thought I'd document something like this. Her voice was small at first but growing stronger, amplified across the parking lot, across the live streams, across the moment. I was sitting in seat 23B, 2 rows behind Aaron and his mother. I watched what happened. I saw the whole thing. Aaron wasn't being bad. He wasn't being uncontrollable. He wasn't being any of the things that Stephanie Crawford said he was being. He was being 6. He was excited. He was curious. He was happy. And a grown woman hit him for that. She hit a child. And then she lied about it. The crowd was silent, letting her speak, giving her space to tell her truth. I learned in school about people who stood up when things were wrong. Rosa Parks. Ruby Bridges. The Little Rock Nine. Kids my age who integrated schools even though adults screamed at them. I learned about the students who walked out to protest school shootings. About Malala who fought for girls' education. I learned about people who made a difference. And I always wondered if I could be brave like that. If something happened in front of me, would I have the courage to act? Jacinta paused, looked out at the sea of faces watching her. And then I realized something. Being brave isn't about not being scared. It's about doing the right thing even when you are scared. I was scared on that plane. I'm scared right now. But fear doesn't mean you don't act. It just means the acting matters more. The crowd remained silent, holding space for her words. The airline says they're investigating. They say they need to follow protocols. They say they're taking this seriously. But we've already investigated. We saw what happened. 80 million people saw what happened. The video doesn't lie. The evidence doesn't need an internal review. Stephanie Crawford assaulted a child. She grabbed him. She slapped him hard enough to leave a bruise. She terrorized a 6-year-old boy for being excited about flying. And then she stood there and justified it. Said she had a right to maintain order. Said he was uncontrollable. Said his mother was aggressive. She lied about every single part of it. Jacinta's voice was stronger now, the fear burning away in the face of purpose. Stephanie Crawford should be fired. Not investigated. Not placed on administrative leave. Fired. And she should be arrested. Because what she did is called assault. It has a legal definition. It has consequences. Or at least it should have consequences. Because if it doesn't, if she gets away with this because the airline wants to protect itself more than it wants to protect children, then what message does that send? It sends the message that some people are above accountability. That some actions are acceptable if you're in a position of authority. That some children don't matter enough to defend. The crowd began to murmur, energy building again. I'm here today because Aaron matters. Because every child who flies should be safe. Because no parent should have to worry that the people responsible for their child's safety might hurt them instead. Because saying, "That's not okay," is something even an 11-year-old can do. Jacinta looked directly at the building behind the crowd, at the glass windows reflecting the mass of people gathered below, at the executives who were probably watching from inside. I know you're in there. I know you're watching. I know you're having meetings about how to handle this. How to minimize damage. How to protect your brand. But here's what I want you to understand. We're not going away. This isn't going to blow over. You can't wait us out or buy us off or investigate this into nothing. We will be here. We will keep showing up. We will keep demanding justice until you do the right thing. Her voice rang out across the parking lot, carried by the sound system, captured by cameras, amplified by 800 people who'd shown up to add their voices to hers. Fire Stephanie Crawford. Arrest Stephanie Crawford. Hold your company accountable for protecting someone who hurt a child. Do the right thing not because it's good PR but because it's right. That's what we're demanding. That's what we deserve. That's what Aaron deserves. Jacinta stepped back from the microphone, her prepared speech finished, her voice hoarse from speaking louder than she ever had, her hands still shaking but from adrenaline now instead of fear. For one heartbeat there was silence. Then the crowd erupted. Applause that shook the ground. Chanting that drowned out the helicopters. Fire Crawford now. Fire Crawford now. 800 voices becoming one voice, one demand, one undeniable presence that couldn't be ignored or dismissed or explained away. Jacinta stood on that stage, small and young and powerful, watching 800 people stand up for what she'd started, for what Aaron deserved, for what justice demanded. In the car at the edge of the parking lot, Aaron pressed his hand against the window, watching all these people who'd come because of what happened to him. His mother beside him saw him do it, saw something shift in his expression, saw him understanding for the first time that he wasn't alone, that he mattered, that people fought for him. Near the stage, Matthew Richardson stood with his clipboard, satisfaction written across his face because this was what justice looked like when people demanded it loudly enough. This was what happened when silence broke. This was what changed things. If you've stayed with this story this far, if you felt what just happened in that speech, if you understand why this moment matters, then hit that subscribe button right now. Because what happens next is going to show you the power of people refusing to accept that some injustices are just the way things are. The protest continued for another hour. More speeches. More chanting. More demands. The counter-protesters eventually left, their small numbers overwhelmed by the larger crowd's sustained presence. The news cameras captured everything. The helicopters circled overhead. And inside that glass building, decisions were being made. Because sometimes when enough people show up and speak loud enough, power has no choice but to listen. The protest made national news before it even ended. Camera crews from every major network positioned themselves around the crowd, their helicopters circling overhead, capturing aerial footage of what could only be described as a sea of people. Over 800 bodies packed into the parking lot and surrounding streets of Airline headquarters, all of them there because an 11-year-old girl had asked them to show up, and they had answered. Footage of Jacinta's speech started circulating on social media before she'd even left the podium. Clips of her small voice saying, "Being brave isn't about not being scared," went viral within minutes. The image of her standing at the microphone, dwarfed by the adults around her but somehow commanding the attention of hundreds, became the defining photo of the day. News outlets ran it as their lead story. 11-year-old organizes massive protest for justice. Child activist demands accountability. From viral video to movement, the Jacinta Morrison story. By evening, the video of her speech had been shared millions of times. Not just the speech itself but the context around it. The original video of the slap, now viewed over 80 million times. The airline's inadequate responses. Moses Patterson's press conference full of empty protocols. Stephanie Crawford's attorney calling Jacinta overzealous. The timeline of events that showed a corporation trying to protect itself until public pressure made protection impossible. And the public pressure was becoming overwhelming. Social media campaigns that had started as expressions of outrage crystallized into organized action. A new hashtag emerged alongside hashtag Justice for Aaron, hashtag Boycott Until Justice. People weren't just angry anymore. They were refusing to fly with the airline until Stephanie Crawford was fired and charged. They were canceling their reservations. They were choosing competitors. They were posting screenshots of canceled flights with captions like, "Not one more dollar until they do the right thing." The airline's social media accounts became battlegrounds. Every post they made, no matter how innocuous, was flooded with comments demanding accountability. A promotional post about vacation destinations. "I'll vacation somewhere your employees don't assault children." An announcement about new routes. New route to justice? Fire Stephanie Crawford. A cheerful customer service response. You know what would be good customer service? Not protecting people who hit kids. The airline stock, which had been dropping slowly over the week as the controversy built, took a sharp dive on Friday afternoon as news of the protests spread. Down 3% by market close. Financial analysts were writing pieces about the cost of corporate inaction, about how brand damage in the age of social media could translate to real financial consequences, about how the airline had mishandled this from the beginning and was now paying for it. That evening, as protesters dispersed and Jacinta rode home exhausted but exhilarated, an emergency board meeting was convened at airline headquarters. The same building that had been surrounded by chanting protesters hours earlier now hosted a very different kind of gathering. Board members, executives, legal counsel, PR consultants, all assembled in a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the now empty parking lot where signs and purple shirts had filled the space just hours before. The meeting lasted 4 hours. Voices were raised. Resignation threats were made. The head of PR presented data showing the scope of the damage. Millions in lost bookings, competitor airlines reporting unusual surges in reservations, social media sentiment analysis showing brand perception at an all-time low. The legal team outlined their options, their liability, their exposure. The CFO presented projections showing what continued boycotts could cost them in the coming quarters. And the CEO, who'd been notably absent from all public statements, who'd let Moses Patterson be the face of this disaster, finally made a decision. Sunday morning, 9 a.m. Most of the country was sleeping in, drinking coffee, scrolling through weekend news. The airline released a statement on all their platforms simultaneously. Not a press conference this time, not Moses Patterson reading from a script. Just words on a screen that had been carefully crafted by lawyers and PR professionals and executives who'd finally realized that protocols and investigations and administrative leave weren't going to save them. After completing our thorough investigation and reviewing additional evidence, including video footage and witness testimonies, we have terminated Stephanie Crawford's employment effective immediately. Her actions on Flight 447 were unacceptable and violated our core values of safety, dignity, and respect for all passengers. We apologize unreservedly to Josephine, Aaron, and all passengers affected by this incident. We failed in our duty to protect a child in our care, and we failed in our initial response to address this situation with the seriousness it deserved. Effective immediately, we are implementing mandatory anti-bias training for all staff across all departments. We are creating an independent review board for passenger complaints, with community oversight, to ensure that concerns are heard and addressed appropriately. We are reviewing our protocols for handling allegations of discrimination and abuse to ensure swift and appropriate action. We recognize that these steps do not undo the harm caused to Aaron and his family. We recognize that our initial response compounded that harm. We commit to doing better, being better, and ensuring that no child is ever treated this way on one of our aircraft again. The statement was everything their previous statements hadn't been: specific, accountable, clear. It named Stephanie Crawford. It acknowledged failure. It outlined concrete actions, not vague promises of investigation. The response online was immediate and mixed. Some people celebrated the victory, the proof that public pressure and organized action could force corporations to act with integrity. Others pointed out that this only happened because a video went viral, because protests were organized, because the financial cost became too high to ignore. That justice shouldn't require 80 million views and a stock price drop to matter. Both things were true. Both things could exist simultaneously. This was progress and it was inadequate. This was accountability and it had taken too long. This was justice and it shouldn't have required an 11-year-old to organize a protest to achieve it. By Sunday afternoon, another announcement came, this one from the district attorney's office. After reviewing evidence including video documentation and witness statements, our office has filed charges against Stephanie Crawford for assault of a minor. Ms. Crawford is scheduled to be arraigned on Tuesday morning. We take allegations of child abuse seriously, regardless of where they occur or who commits them. Assault of a minor. Criminal charges. Not just fired but facing legal consequences. The thing Josephine had been told would be hard to prove without video evidence was now being prosecuted because there was video evidence, because Jacinta had recorded it, because she'd shared it, because she'd refused to let it be dismissed as a misunderstanding. Matthew Richardson scheduled a press conference for Sunday evening. He stood at a podium outside his law office, Josephine beside him holding Aaron's hand, her face showing exhaustion and relief in equal measure. "This is what accountability looks like," Matthew said, his voice firm and clear. "This is what happens when people refuse to accept injustice. When they document it, share it, organize around it, demand better." Stephanie Crawford has been fired. She's facing criminal charges. The airline is implementing policy changes. This didn't happen because corporations voluntarily do the right thing. It happened because people made it impossible for them not to. He gestured to Josephine. Ms. Josephine would like to say a few words. Josephine stepped to the microphone, Aaron partially hidden behind her legs, still shy of cameras and attention, still processing everything that had happened since that flight. "I want to thank everyone who supported us. Everyone who watched that video and felt outraged. Everyone who showed up to the protest yesterday. Everyone who canceled their flights and demanded justice." Her voice was steady now, strengthened by vindication. "But most of all, I want to thank Jacinta Morrison. An 11-year-old girl did what a major corporation wouldn't do. She told the truth. She documented what happened when adults wanted to look away. She organized action when systems wanted to maintain status quo. She gave my son a voice when the world wanted him to be silent." Josephine's voice broke slightly. "Aaron is 6 years old. He didn't ask for any of this. He just wanted to look at clouds and ask questions about airplanes. But because one person decided his curiosity was a problem, because one person let their prejudices become violence, my baby was hurt. And if Jacinta hadn't recorded it, if she hadn't shared it, if she hadn't organized that protest, we'd still be fighting just to be believed. So thank you, Jacinta. From the bottom of my heart. Thank you for seeing my son as someone worth fighting for." The press conference ended with reporters shouting questions about the lawsuit Matthew was filing, about what justice looked like beyond firing and charges, about whether this would change how airlines handled discrimination complaints. Matthew answered some, deflected others, kept the focus on the outcome. Accountability had been achieved, but the work of ensuring it didn't happen again was just beginning. 1 week later, Jacinta Morrison sat in her 5th period math class, trying to focus on algebra equations while her phone buzzed with notifications she wasn't allowed to check during school hours. Life had returned to some version of normal, or at least what passed for normal when you'd accidentally become famous for organizing a protest that made national news. Her classmates treated her differently now. Some with admiration, some with jealousy, some with careful distance, like fame might be contagious. Her teachers didn't quite know how to interact with a student who'd been interviewed on national television. The principal had called her into his office not to discipline her but to tell her the school was proud of her, which felt strange and uncomfortable because she hadn't done it for pride, she'd done it because it was right. After school she had another interview scheduled. A reporter from a major magazine doing a follow-up piece, wanting to know how she felt now that Stephanie Crawford had been fired and charged, now that the airline had implemented changes, now that justice had supposedly been served. Jacinta sat in her living room with Rosaline beside her, the reporter across from them with a recording device between them, capturing every word for an article that would be read by hundreds of thousands of people who thought they knew Jacinta's story but only knew the viral parts. "How do you feel now that Stephanie Crawford has been fired and charged?" the reporter asked, the expected question, the obvious question. Jacinta had been asked this a dozen times already by different reporters, and each time she tried to find words that captured the complexity of what she felt, the way relief and frustration could exist simultaneously. "I feel like justice happened," she said carefully. "Stephanie Crawford can't hurt another child on an airplane. That matters. The airline is making changes that might prevent this from happening to someone else. That matters too." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "But I also feel like it shouldn't have taken 80 million people watching a video for it to happen. Aaron should have been believed from the start. His mom should have been believed. The other passengers who witnessed it should have been enough. But they weren't. It took a viral video and a protest and a stock price dropping before the airline did the right thing. That's not really justice. That's just consequences becoming too expensive to ignore." The reporter nodded, scribbling notes. "What do you want people to take away from this? What's the lesson here?" Jacinta thought about all the messages she'd received over the past 2 weeks. The supportive ones and the hateful ones. The people thanking her and the people calling her names. The adults praising her courage and the adults questioning her parents. All of it swirling together into a complicated mess that couldn't be reduced to a simple lesson or a neat moral. "That your voice matters," she said finally. "Even if you're a kid. Even if you're scared. Even if you think nobody will listen. If you see something wrong, say something. Record it if you can. Share it if it's safe. Don't let people tell you to just let it go, to not make waves, to accept that this is just how things are. Because letting it go means it happens again to someone else. Speaking up means maybe, possibly, it gets a little bit harder for the next person who wants to hurt someone and get away with it." She looked directly at the reporter, at the recording device, at the audience beyond them who would read these words later. "I didn't do anything special. I just used the tools I had. A tablet with a camera. A social media account. A voice that I decided was worth using even though I'm 11 and people kept telling me I was too young to understand. But I understood what I saw. I understood that hitting a child is wrong. I understood that lying about it is wrong. I understood that systems protecting abusers is wrong. You don't need to be an adult to understand right and wrong. You just need to care enough to act on it." Rosaline, sitting beside her, reached over and squeezed her hand. When the reporter asked if she had anything to add, Rosaline's voice was thick with emotion. "I'm proud of my niece. So proud. She didn't just record a video. She started a movement. She showed people that one person, even a young person, even someone without power or authority or resources, can make a difference when they refuse to accept injustice." Jacinta didn't wait for adults to fix this. She fixed it herself. And in doing so, she reminded all of us that we have more power than we think we do when we choose to use it. The interview ended. The reporter packed up her equipment, thanked them both, promised to send Jacinta a copy of the article before it was published. Life continued in its new normal rhythm of school and homework and robotics club and occasional interview requests that her parents carefully vetted. Updates came in pieces over the following weeks, fragments of information that showed the ripple effects of what Jacinta had started. Aaron was doing better. Josephine posted occasional updates on a social media account she'd created to thank supporters. He was attending therapy, working through the trauma with a child psychologist who specialized in helping kids process frightening experiences. He still had nightmares sometimes. He was still nervous around strangers, still flinched when people moved too quickly near him. But he was healing. Slowly, gradually he was learning to feel safe again. The airline, true to their statement, had implemented changes. Mandatory anti-bias training for all employees, not just flight attendants but everyone from baggage handlers to executives. The independent review board was being established with actual community members, not just airline-appointed representatives. 3 other complaints against staff members had been reopened for investigation, complaints that had been dismissed or buried before but now were being taken seriously. 2 employees had been placed under investigation for incidents similar to what happened to Aaron, their patterns of behavior finally being examined instead of excused. Jacinta received awards from civil rights organizations. Plaques and certificates that her mother hung on her bedroom wall, tangible recognition of intangible courage. She was invited to speak at conferences, to share her story with audiences of activists and organizers and people who'd been fighting these battles long before Jacinta knew they existed. She accepted some invitations and declined others, trying to balance being a voice for change with being an 11-year-old kid who just wanted to work on her robotics projects and hang out with her friends. But the most important update, the one that mattered more to Jacinta than any award or recognition, came 3 weeks after the protest. Josephine reached out through Rosaline, asking if Jacinta would be willing to video call with Aaron. He'd been asking about her, Josephine said. Asking about the girl who'd helped him, who'd made people listen when he couldn't make them listen himself. Jacinta sat at her desk on a Saturday afternoon, tablet propped up, nervousness fluttering in her chest as the call connected. Aaron's face appeared on screen, smaller than she remembered, younger, his eyes still carrying shadows of what he'd experienced but also something lighter, something that looked like healing. "Hi Aaron," Jacinta said softly. "Hi." Aaron's voice was quiet, shy but there. Present. Not the terrified scream from the video but the voice of a 6-year-old trying to find words for something complicated. Josephine's voice came from off-screen. "Aaron wanted to tell you something." "Go ahead, baby." Aaron looked down, then back up at the camera, at Jacinta's face watching him with gentle attention. "Thank you for helping me," he said, the words clearly rehearsed but genuine. "My mom said you're the one who made the video. That you're the one who made people believe us." Jacinta felt tears prickling her eyes but kept her voice steady. "You're welcome, Aaron. I'm so sorry that happened to you. Nobody should hurt you and get away with it. Nobody should hurt any kid and get away with it." Aaron nodded seriously, like this was an important truth he was learning. Then his expression shifted, becoming more childlike, more normal, like he was remembering how to be 6 years old without fear attached to it. "Do you like video games?" he asked. Jacinta blinked, surprised by the shift but grateful for it. "Yeah, I do. Do you?" I like the racing ones. And the ones with animals. Do you have a favorite?" They talked for 20 minutes about normal kid stuff. Video games and favorite movies and what they were learning in school. Aaron told her about a book he was reading about planes because despite everything he still loved planes, still thought they were magical. Jacinta told him about her robotics project, about the code she was writing to make a robot navigate obstacles. It was normal and mundane and absolutely beautiful. 2 kids just talking, the trauma present but not consuming, the healing happening in these small moments of ordinary childhood being reclaimed. When they ended the call, Josephine came back on screen briefly. "Thank you," she said simply. "Not just for the video. For this. For treating him like a kid instead of a victim. For giving him back a piece of his childhood." After the call ended, Jacinta sat at her desk for a long time, thinking about everything that had happened since that Tuesday afternoon on Flight 447. About the choice to press record. The choice to share the video. The choice to organize a protest. All of it stemming from one moment of seeing something wrong and deciding it mattered enough to act. Jacinta Morrison is 11 years old. She likes robotics and coding and documenting the world through the lens of her tablet. She never wanted to be famous. Never wanted to be interviewed on national television or receive awards from civil rights organizations or have her face recognized by strangers at the grocery store. She just wanted to tell the truth. But in telling that truth, in refusing to let Aaron's assault be dismissed as a misunderstanding or buried under corporate protocols, in organizing hundreds of people to demand accountability, she reminded us of something we risk forgetting in our complicated, cynical world. She reminded us that courage doesn't have an age requirement. That justice delayed is justice denied. That sometimes the smallest voices carry the loudest truth when they refuse to be silenced. The video has now been viewed over 150 million times. 150 million people have witnessed what happened to Aaron. But beyond the views, beyond the viral moment, beyond the hashtags and the headlines and the news cycles that eventually moved on to the next story, There are real people whose lives were changed by what Jacinta did. There's a little boy who can look at himself in the mirror and know that when he was hurt, people fought for him. That his pain mattered. That he wasn't alone. There's a mother who learned that speaking truth to power sometimes works when you have proof on your side, when you have allies willing to amplify your voice, when you refuse to accept silence as the price of peace. There's a corporation that learned the hard way that in the age of smartphones and social media, covering up injustice is impossible and the cost of doing the right thing is always less than the cost of defending the wrong thing. And there's a young girl who learned that her voice matters, that her actions have consequences, that seeing wrong and choosing to document it, share it, organize around it, can actually make a difference in the real world, not just the digital one. Stephanie Crawford was convicted of assault of a minor 6 months later. She served 4 months in jail and was placed on probation for 2 years. It wasn't enough time for what she'd done, but it was more than she would have faced if Jacinta had looked away, if she'd decided it wasn't her business, if she'd just been a passive witness instead of an active documenter. The airline implemented their changes, and while they're not perfect, while discrimination still happens, the independent review board has actually held employees accountable in ways the internal system never did. 3 employees have been terminated for discriminatory behavior in the years since the protest. Dozens more have been disciplined. It's not a complete solution, but it's better than it was. And Jacinta? She went back to being a kid who loves robotics and coding and documenting the world. She still uses her tablet to record things she finds interesting. She still posts on social media, though now she has hundreds of thousands of followers who pay attention to what she shares. She's more careful now, more aware of her platform, more conscious that her voice reaches farther than most 11-year-olds. But she's still 11. Still doing homework and arguing with her parents about bedtime and working on robotics projects and being a kid. Because that's what she is. A kid who did an extraordinary thing not because she was extraordinary, but because she saw something that needed to be seen and refused to look away. If this story moved you, if you believe that Jacinta did the right thing, if you think we need more people willing to document injustice and demand accountability, hit that subscribe button right now. Because stories like this, stories that show ordinary people doing extraordinary things when they choose courage over comfort, these are the stories we need to keep telling. These are the stories that remind us what's possible when we refuse to accept that wrong is inevitable. The world needs more Jacintas. More people who see injustice and record it. More people who have evidence and share it. More people who organize movements instead of just posting thoughts and prayers. More people who understand that your voice matters regardless of your age, that truth is powerful regardless of who speaks it, that standing up for what's right is never the wrong thing to do even when it's scary, even when it's hard, even when you're 11 years old and trembling at a microphone in front of hundreds of people. Jacinta Morrison recorded 2 minutes and 14 seconds of video on a Tuesday afternoon. But what she really recorded was proof that one person, armed with nothing but a tablet and a conscience and a refusal to look away, can change outcomes. Can force accountability. Can make justice happen when systems would prefer to call it a misunderstanding and move on. Aaron is 7 now. He still has moments where the trauma surfaces, where he gets anxious in crowded places or nervous around authority figures. But he also has moments where he's just a 7-year-old who loves planes and video games and asking too many questions. He has a therapist who's helping him heal. He has a mother who fought for him. And he has the knowledge that when he was hurt, when the world tried to dismiss his pain, an 11-year-old girl he'd never met decided he mattered enough to fight for. That matters. More than views or hashtags or viral moments. That matters. Jacinta's voice cuts through one final time, the same voice from the beginning, steady and clear and young and powerful all at once. I'm Jacinta Morrison. And this is what happened on Flight 447. This is what happened when one girl chose to record instead of look away. When one girl chose to share instead of delete. When one girl chose to organize instead of assume adults would handle it. When one girl chose courage. This is what happened when truth met technology met determination. This is what happened when justice required a voice small enough to fit through the cracks of corporate protocols and loud enough to demand accountability anyway. This is what happened on Flight 447. And this is what can happen when any of us, regardless of age or authority or resources, decides that wrong deserves to be documented, shared, and fought against until it becomes right. The question isn't whether you have the power to make a difference. Jacinta proved you do. The question is whether you'll use it when the moment comes, when you witness injustice, when you have the choice to record or look away, to share or delete, to speak or stay silent. What will you choose?